Good morning, Bucknutters, and welcome to the Bucknuts Morning 5 here on Friday, April 17th, 2015. I am Dave Biddle, and I'm joined by the people's champ, Matt Baxendell. Bax, I'm playing hurt today, my man. Got strep throat. What's interesting about strep is my throat doesn't even hurt that bad, but I feel like I was hit by a truck, so there is that. That's no fun at all.
You gotta be careful, Dave. This time of year, the Michigan fans are out in force trying to spread the word and stop the spread of the Ohio State good word of all the Buckeye things that they're doing. After all, their spring game was a mess. So they can't let guys like you and I go out and tell everybody how good the Buckeyes are going to be. It's only going to put them further behind in recruiting.
Well, you know what? I can't blame this one on Michigan fans. This is what I have, having two young daughters in the house. I was the fourth and final one of the family to get it. My youngest daughter had it first. Then my wife had it. Then my oldest daughter had it. Now I'm the fourth one to get it. But anyway, moving right along. The spring game, of course, is tomorrow at 1:30 at Ohio Stadium. The game will be televised by Big Ten Network if you can't make it down to the Horseshoe. Now, the weather is going to be excellent tomorrow. Sunny and a high of 74. Couldn't ask for anything better than that. So, Bax, what kind of crowd can we expect tomorrow? Nice weather, a team coming off a national championship, just $5 tickets. Can Ohio State beat its own record of 95,000 tomorrow, Bax? By the way, they set that record in 2009. Can they top 95,000 tomorrow, Bax?
Absolutely. I was at that 95,000 game in 2009 where everybody wanted to see how Terrell Pryor had improved, and he didn't let us down by passing 2 touchdown passes in the last minute of the first half. And that 95,000 turned into 5,000 quite quickly because everybody saw what they wanted to see and went home. I expect the Buckeyes tomorrow to have 100,000 people in the Horseshoe. If it's 74 degrees and sunny and no chance of rain, the spring game has always been dependent on having good weather, having cheap tickets, and right now you have a confluence of those events, and you have a Buckeyes football team coming off a national championship. I expect 100,000 people in the Horseshoe tomorrow. I'll be very surprised, honestly, if we don't get that number. And unlike Alabama and all those other places who get put up these big numbers, Ohio State fans are paying. It's $5 a ticket in person. You go on Ticketmaster, it's $10 with fees. And plus all the people who bring their families, kids 6 and under are free. So they're going to be factored in a part of that attendance as well. You're going to see a lot of people in the Horseshoe tomorrow. There will be a record set. It'll just be another in a long line of extremely successful days for Ohio State. Seems like there are very few bad days anymore. They're all just extremely great days that everybody else in the country is going to be jealous of. Again.
Let's delve into things we're looking forward to seeing during tomorrow's game. First of all, I think it's pretty cool that Urban Meyer is letting what he calls the 1A starters play the first 2 series of the game. That'll be great for the fans to see guys like Cardale Jones and Joey Bosa out there for a little bit. I thought those guys wouldn't play at all. Now, Meyer did qualify that. He said the first 2 series will be, quote, controlled environments, and the Buckeyes won't be tackling to the ground during that time, obviously, to limit the chance of injuries. A lot of young players that are going to have key roles this fall are going to get a chance to see a lot of playing time tomorrow. And one guy I'm really looking forward to seeing is Dante Booker. He won't be a starter this fall. There's simply no room with Darren Lee, Raekwon McMillan, and Joshua Perry locked into starting roles. But Booker's teammates and coaches continue to talk him up as the best backup linebacker on the team. So I'm really looking forward to seeing Booker tomorrow. Bax, give us your thoughts on Booker and talk about any other players you're looking forward to seeing tomorrow.
Well, Booker's a guy who was a huge-time recruit. I mean, he was a borderline 5-star kid coming out of Ohio last year. Urban talked up how happy he was with his work off the field, how excited he was with his future multiple times. I mean, Booker's the guy who probably won't play a lot this year, let's be very honest. It's going to take Ohio State winning games by a lot just because you have McMillan, who's very clearly the heir apparent at middle linebacker, and Perry and Darren Lee. I mean, that's one of the best linebacker groups in the country. But, man, Booker is extremely athletic. He's one of those players that you're not going to see much from him for a year or two, and then he's going to utterly explode onto the scene. And I just don't think he's going to explode onto the scene until next year just because he's at a logjam at his position. As for players I'm excited to see, I'm kind of really excited to see these young defensive ends. A little bit of the mystery was out of it whenever Tyquan Lewis was supposed to be the guy, and he was expected to play, but he's out now for the spring game with a minor injury. And so it means we're going to get to see Darius Slade, who is the ultimate mystery man at OSU. The kid never even had an official visit before he came to Ohio State. We've heard a lot of really good things about him. And after redshirting last year, he could be a big-time contributor this year. I think everybody wants to see Sam Hubbard. We've heard so much hype about him that at this point I'd like to actually see the guy play in a game just to see what he has to offer. Those are two of the guys I'm very, very excited to see. And I think I'm also extremely excited to see the young wide receivers. I want to see Terry McLaurin. I want to see Paris Campbell. I want to see that group out there, and I want to see if they really have the speed that everybody's hyping up. I would have talked about cornerback a little bit more excitedly if it wasn't for yet another injury to Marshawn Lattimore, which is really becoming so concerning because when you're hurting your hamstrings like he is, for a guy who's supposed to be a speed merchant, that's very concerning. And luckily the Buckeyes had two guys in Garyon Conley and Damian Webb opposite Eli Apple, so they're going to have depth at the position. But that was another spot where you would have seen a really talented, highly rated set of recruits who are now going into their second season at OSU who would have been competing for a spot on the field against each other. So that's a little disappointing with Lattimore's injury, but I think the wide receivers and the young defensive ends are probably the spots that I'm most excited to see from the Buckeyes.
Yeah, the guys I'm looking forward to seeing, and you mentioned some of these guys, 5 offensive skilled position players in particular, Noah Brown, Paris Campbell, Terry McLaurin. Briante Dunn's not a young guy anymore, but he seems to be coming on as a fourth-year junior. Maybe he's going to actually get a chance to see some meaningful snaps this fall. And also Marcus Ball. He's going to be the number 2 tight end. They've been down on his blocking. Can he be more of a physical blocker? We know he can catch the ball. So those are 5 guys on offense, Noah Brown, Paris Campbell, Terry McLaurin, Briante Dunn, and Marcus Ball. Then on defense, you hit on it. I'm looking forward to seeing those young defensive linemen, the tackles, Donovan Munger, Mike Hill, Tracy Sprinkle, and then those defensive ends, Jalen Holmes, Sam Hubbard, and Darius Slade. As you mentioned, Bax, Tyquan Lewis seems like he's got that weak side defensive end spot locked down as far as being the starter, but they're going to rotate a lot of guys in there. So a lot of these guys are going to play integral roles this fall. So Sam Hubbard, Darius Slade, Jalen Holmes, how do they look? The guys inside, Munger, Hill, Sprinkle, who can really push Tommy Shutt for a starting role? So going to be really keeping a close eye on those guys. On the recruiting front, it's obviously a huge recruiting weekend for the Buckeyes, with the biggest visit coming from 4-star offensive tackle Liam Eichenberg from Cleveland St. Ignatius. Eichenberg is actually going to begin his visit later today and will carry it over through the spring game tomorrow. Then Eichenberg will announce his decision on Twitter on Sunday. No hat dance. He's not doing it on having a press conference. He's just going to announce it on Twitter. I like that. No frills. Unfortunately, Bax, it looks like he's Notre Dame bound, if you trust in Steve Wiltfong, and I do. But perhaps Urban Meyer can pull a rabbit out of his hat here. Your thoughts on Eichenberg? Do you think the Buckeyes are an extreme dark horse, or do you think this could go either way?
Oh, I certainly hope it can go either way. I mean, in a year where Ohio State's recruiting seems like it literally can't get any better with guys like Tristan Wallace now joining the group. I mean, Ohio State's average star rating is just gigantic compared to the rest of the country. You'd figure we'd be doing fantastic in Ohio with offensive linemen. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be the case between Tommy Kramer and Liam Eichenberg. I mean, these are the top 2 linemen in the state of Ohio, both of them very high 4-star, low 5-star guys. Kramer's already committed to Notre Dame, and now Eichenberg is getting drawn to Notre Dame. And this is the reason why you can literally never factor Notre Dame out of recruiting, even when their football team has largely been irrelevant for a very long time. It's because those guys go to Catholic high schools, and they have a personal draw to the program beyond just football. And that's something that Ohio State's going to have to always overcome with a large number of Catholic high schools in the state of Ohio that produce a lot of really good prospects. For Eichenberg, though, I think it's a very good sign for Ohio State that they're getting the last visit. I think it's either going to solidify his decision to Notre Dame or it's going to flip it on its head. I think that this is a situation where Urban Meyer excels. How many times has Urban Meyer closed hard on somebody on a weekend visit, and boom, next thing you know, they're a Buckeye? Heck, look at Tristan Wallace not that long ago. He was talking about all Texas schools, all of them. He'd been committed to a Texas school before. Comes into Ohio State, raves about the place, and then a couple weeks later, he's a Buckeye. He gets in the head of Jared Guarantano, and Guarantano wasn't going to commit anyways, obviously, but still, Wallace was ready to rock and roll. He knew when he had to pull the trigger, and he did. It's an example of Urban closing. Urban famously closed on Briante Dunn whenever Briante was waffling between Ohio State and that school up north by going over to him after a nice visit, knocking on his window, rolling down, getting Briante to roll his window down, and he says, "Do I really need to make this visit next week, or are you just going to hurry up and commit?" And guess where Briante Dunn ended up in college? Urban Meyer is a closer. So while I'm sure Steve's right now in saying that Liam Eichenberg is leaning towards Notre Dame, we'll see where he stands on Sunday, because this is always a big-time visit weekend for Ohio State for the spring game. There's 100,000 people in the stands for his spring game. It's going to make an impression on him. The offensive line is going to get nothing but continued good press because of the success that they've had under Ed Warner, who's now also the offensive coordinator. So a lot of great things here that could appeal to a guy like Liam Eichenberg. Hopefully Urban Meyer and company can close the deal and prevent him from going to Notre Dame, because then that would mean that Ohio State would have lost the top 2 offensive linemen in the state of Ohio in 1 year to Notre Dame, which is very tough to take, because otherwise Ohio State's absolutely killing it, not just in the state of Ohio, but recruiting nationally. So to say that this is a big visit is probably an understatement. It's kind of a positionally defining visit for this season, because those were the 2 offensive linemen that were near the top of Ohio State's board, and they were local kids. Losing both of them would be a very big disappointment.
Final topic, real quick. Do you think there's a chance, Bax, a realistic chance that Braxton Miller will transfer? The reason I ask you, Chris Spielman, who I have a lot of respect for, said earlier this week it is his, quote, gut feeling that Braxton will in fact transfer this June. Bax, what chances do you give that of actually transpiring?
I just don't see it. I mean, he spent all this time being part of the football program. He's rehabilitating himself as much as possible. There's a lot of people, I mean, just 2 days ago, one of the boarding house sources was a former player who was saying, I think the staff wants Braxton healthy so they can start him. You know, this is one of those things where when you're looking at a depth situation that has such incredible talent and so much achievement, everybody's going to automatically assume the person who doesn't win the starting job is going to transfer right away. But here's the thing. If Braxton Miller wants to play quarterback and he's healthy by this summer, then assuming that that's all the case, he's going to get a chance to compete to be the starter this fall. And his coaching staff utterly loves Braxton's ability to run. I mean, let's not overlook that. Urban Meyer really, really, really loves Braxton Miller's game-breaking ability on the ground. I just have to look at it like this and say, Urban Meyer, if he had his choice, picked Braxton Miller over J.T. Barrett and Cardale Jones multiple times. And, yes, those guys are still developing. But there's something about Braxton and Urban that makes me think that Urban's really going to give Braxton an extraordinarily fair chance. And on the other side of the coin, if Braxton's shoulder isn't right by this summer, what's he going to do, transfer somewhere just so he can be hurt somewhere else after doing all of his rehab and all of his injury-related stuff for a year and a half at Ohio State? To me, that doesn't make sense. I think this is another example of people assuming that since Braxton Miller is able to go somewhere else, he will. If he's healthy and he thinks he can play, then he's probably going to stay at OSU and compete for the job. That's why Urban Meyer, I think, kind of is still being fairly tight-lipped about the quarterback situation. He told Sports Illustrated this week, he was like, I don't want to say I'm ignoring it, but I'm ignoring it right now. When he was talking about the quarterback situation. Everybody's going to talk about Braxton transferring. I don't see it happening. I'll be very surprised if a guy who spent this much time at Ohio State and has been hurt for as long as he has been is going to up and leave the school just because he thinks he has a better chance to play elsewhere whenever he's going to get a legitimately fair chance to be the starter this fall. Just because we're writing him off as a starter doesn't mean that Urban is, and Urban's the one making the decision.
I think there's a better chance that he'll switch positions than he will transfer, but we'll see what happens. We'll know by June at the very latest. Thanks to the People's Champ, Matt Baxendell. Thanks to all the listeners out there. I appreciate you guys tuning in. I hope you have a great day and a great weekend. Take it away, best damn band in the land.